Scarce had the sun started rising, painting the horizon into an orange and pale fetch, when its rays first kissed old sand of Sarasota Beach. The only sound on this otherwise quiet morning was the gentle crashing of waves to the beach, a tranquil backdrop contrasting with the scene unfolding before their eyes. The detectives' arrival at the scene created a sense of rising apprehension. The scene of the crime was deceptively calm. One glance made it rather obvious that something was completely wrong. The body of a young lady, probably about 30 years old, lay strewn between the sand and scattered shells. Her face was partially obscured by a covering of sand, almost as if the beach itself was trying to cover up the heinous crime that had gone on there. Identification of the victim was quick and easy. Rebecca Myers, a local nurse known and respected by all. She was married, childless, and seemingly had no enemies. What should have been a fairly cut-and-dried tragedy in a small town rapidly developed into something quite different. The thin gold chain, partially buried in the sand, was the first thing investigators' eyes fell on. A small point, yet one that spoke of a personal connection or hidden message. Rebecca's fingers showed real scratch marks, indicative of desperate fighting before her death. The detectives began piecing together this disturbing puzzle, and in doing so realized that this scene did not fit any of the initial explanations. Behind that apparent simplicity of setting lay a deep and dark plot, with layers of secrets lying in wait to surface. With every evidence being gathered, there was an overwhelming sense of something much greater at play. Questions were increasing at a rate that the detectives felt they were just scratching the surface of some dark story concerning Rebecca. The case seemed to unravel in ways that one would not expect. Each detail disclosed a little more of the mystery the town thought it knew. The first concrete lead turned up when it was discovered that Rebecca had been investigating something. Something that seemed to join her death to a love triangle gone wrong. The name David Myers, the victim's husband, kept popping up in documents and messages, pointing at there being more to Rebecca's life than meets the eye. But what had Rebecca actually uncovered? And what were those relationships and threats which had set their deadly course in motion? The investigation was only just beginning, the first steps of which wound through a serpentine path interwoven with secrets and betrayals. The tension was palpable. It was as though the answers all lay buried beneath the surface, and the more details that were divulged, the more mysterious it became. Thus, the next turn of events in terms of the investigation would turn out to be a vital link into understanding what really happened and who was behind the tragic death of Rebecca Myers. As the investigation into Rebecca Myers progressed, detectives unraveled that inside the city of Sarasota lay a facade, tranquil and idyllic, but concealing a web of secrets and betrayals. Now it was time to turn the focus on Rebecca's inner circle, and an intricate web of relationships began to unravel. David Myers, Rebecca's husband, had been at the top of the ring. Popular, charismatic businessman, David apparently had everything money could buy to lead a perfect life with his wife, at least on the outside. Behind closed doors and polished smiles lay a very different tale. David had engaged in an extramarital affair with Angela Roberts, a 28-year-old social worker whose charm and ambition were only as remarkable as her manipulative skills. She was an enigmatic figure, the incarnation of a woman who could forge relationships easily and yet maintain a calculated distance. Her meetings with David were discreet, often marked with silent intensity, which did not go unnoticed by those who watched carefully. The couple maintained a facade of casual friendship, but the details of the case began to reveal a much deeper and more committed connection. What had been taking place between David and Angela was more than just an affair. It was a relationship characterized by tension and secrecy. Rebecca, ever watchful and observant, had started to suspect the connection between the two. That which at first appeared to be emotional treachery suddenly assumed a much more perilous character. The most convincing evidence that all was not well came in the form of shocking revelations that Rebecca made. Confidential documents and messages proved that this was far from just a simple love affair between David and Angela. There were conversations indicating illegal financial schemes, corruption, and shady business deals involving David and Angela. Slowly but surely, Rebecca pieced this puzzle together, and with each discovery, she came closer to a horrifying truth. Confrontation with the discoveries led to hot arguments and veiled threats against David and Angela. Rebecca held in her hands information that could ruin everybody involved and dismantle the criminal scheme hiding behind appearances. Alarm bells began ringing, and danger was looming in the air. The tranquil life of David and Angela was fast falling apart, while their struggle to save their secrets made all actions desperate. What once started out as a love triangle would yield to an escalating combat game, with truth as the prize each of them wanted to conceal from the others. The more the detectives knew about David and Angela, the more questions seemed to spring up. How could Rebecca have been so prescient? And just what had David and Angela been up to? The next step in the investigation would bring answers and open up new possibilities, the deepening mystery of Rebecca Myers' death. An interesting turn the investigation took was when detectives started investigating Rebecca Myers and her mission, find answers. Things only got more mysterious, for it was then discovered that Rebecca wasn't just some woman betrayed in one way or another, but indeed a girl who was actually uncovering dark secrets. Her determination unveiled part of her personality few knew could expose the truth. Rebecca had gone out into the street to investigate a suspicious money scheme involving her husband, David, and his lover, Angela. She hoped that she would find proof that connected the two in illegal activities that would ruin their lives if exposed. What had started as a casual suspicion instantly became a dangerous mission. There were several folders full of financial documents, emails encrypted with open PGP software, and handwritten notes. Rebecca's notes reflected a mind that had become relentless, showing mounting pressure of urgency. She had started working out a detailed dossier, showing the relationship between David, Angela, and a series of fraudulent transactions, threw open some serious legal questions about David's business dealing. Rebecca had reached out to a confidential source, someone on the inside regarding the scheme, and provided her with important information and damaging documents. The source had been the key to unlock it all, but was also a possible risk. Rebecca knew that every second of her investigation might put her in danger. The closer Rebecca seemed to get to the truth, the more wrathful David and Angela appeared to become. Rebecca began receiving direct threats as the investigation deepened, at which point she began taking precautions. She hired a private detective for protection and stepped back from her usual routines in an effort not to be traced. Tension escalated day by day, and Rebecca knew very well that she was playing with fire. The threats increased in frequency and intensity. Clear indication of their desperation: keep the secrets buried. Rebecca came to a juncture where she had evidence that could blow the lid off at an exponential risk. It now boiled down to who was actually behind the threats and how high they would go to keep their secrets safe. As Rebecca readied her deciding move, the detectives began to see that her quest for justice was intricately linked to her desperate struggle to survive. The investigation was at the threshold of its most essential turn of events. The next chapter would bring answers: how Rebecca would get out of increasing danger, and how dangerous her decision to confront David and Angela with reality was going to be. Maybe it would finally answer what had happened to her death and destroy the scheme, put her life in danger. Following the mysterious death of Rebecca Myers, investigators met with a new character. Colleague, Eric Johnson. A man in the middle-age bracket, weary in appearance, with an air of disillusionment, Eric was the kind of guy who resembled a character straight out of some noir novel. He seemed to know a great deal about Rebecca's life and was quite willing to share his information, even though he really appeared to be quite hesitant. Eric and Rebecca had worked together in a local hospital years ago. Their relationship had been a mix of camaraderie and mutual respect. Of late, Eric had come to observe a change in Rebecca's behavior, increasingly isolated and focused on something he could hardly pinpoint. This became all the more evident when Rebecca started talking about issues that sounded extraordinary, much so in regards to her husband David. Eric told the detectives that he often saw Rebecca yelling violently at David and vice versa. He knew that those were not about just any household issues, but about something more personal and dark. Rebecca had grown quite agitated, clearly, and several times Eric happened to catch fragments of conversations concerning some sort of dangerous secret, and things that need to be exposed. Just what Rebecca was trying to uncover and what David was trying to hide remained a mystery. But Eric's words began to shed light on the situation. Apart from Rebecca's conversations with David, Eric also talked about a particular incident that had happened weeks before Rebecca's death. He said that he had seen David and Angela Roberts in a local cafe, in a very tense and energetic meeting. The discussion seemed far more aggressive than an ordinary conversation. Eric added that their faces reflected fear and anger, after which he got the feeling that something was going to happen. Eric also revealed how, many a time, Rebecca had asked him for help in working through financial documents and transactions that she had found. She seemed to be in search of something specific, but never really shared what exactly it was she was looking for. Seeing Rebecca's growing agitation, Eric had tried his best to help as best as he could. Not really aware of the kind of situation that had been unfolding until it was too late. Eric's information began to fill some of the gaps in the investigation, but also introduced new questions. What exactly had Rebecca come up with that she was going to reveal? And how was the tense meeting between David and Angela connected to her death? Eric appeared to be holding a vital piece of the puzzle. Although how far his involvement really went and what effect his information would have remained unclear so far. The next step in the investigation was crucial. To understand deeply what Eric was into, the kind of secrets Rebecca was about to unearth, and how all this linked back to that fateful night on the beach. Manhunt for the truth was building up, the mystery unfolding further into new layers of complexity and danger. Things only thickened more when, further along in the investigation, a new vital piece of information unraveled. Angela Roberts herself and her mysterious association with a financial scheme. A gradual realization began to set in among the detectives that Angela wasn't just another mistress involved in a love affair, was actually part of a complex web of corruption and manipulation. Angela Roberts was immaculately turned out, but behind the charm lay a calculating mind and relentless determination. She moved with ease in social circles and kept an impeccable facade. It wasn't a question of illicit love with her. David Myers was part of a scheme that threatened to blow apart not one, multiple lives. Things turned really dark when detectives turned up financial records that seemed to implicate Angela in a string of suspicious transactions. The documents showed her having received huge sums of money at very strategic times, right at moments when certain critical financial decisions were made by David. Angela was not merely involved in the scheme. From this thickening plot, she had turned into its key operator. After the detectives recovered a set of encrypted communications between Angela and some unknown co-conspirator, only identified by his pseudonym, the investigation dug deeper. The messages revealed discussions about needing to clear the path and eliminate the threats, which directly relate to the actions that would eventually bring about Rebecca's death. The language used in the messages was threatening and indicative of meticulous planning to protect the scheme from exposure. There was in the relationship a dynamic of power and control between Angela and David. Now, Angela subtly but significantly manipulated David through her control of the finances and the connections. What kind of manipulation this had been and how it had interfered with David's decisions was coming out now, slowly, as more evidence came to light. On several occasions, Angela had also been seen in discreet and secretive locations with some persons of dubious profile. It was not until the detectives discovered that she was negotiating with persons in contact, possibly linked to the financial scheme and the attempt to cover up the truth, that these innocuous meetings began to take on a more sinister context. The mystery of Rebecca's death now began to mix and mingle with the acts of Angela and the scheme's intricacy. While she now struggled to keep out of sight, distorting bits of evidence to her favor, detectives were getting ever closer. But with every new discovery, more questions arose. Who really was in control? And just what would be the true cost of Angela's desperate actions? The next step in the investigation would be to understand Angela's role in the broader dynamics of the scheme and how her actions might have engendered the tragic outcome. Now, with pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place, the mystery was deepening that promised to reveal even more hidden secrets and unexpected alliances. As the Rebecca Myers case unfolded, detectives began to dig out increasingly dark details about the events that led up to her death. One of the most intriguing discoveries was the role of Eric Johnson, Rebecca's former colleague, who seemed to be aware of more information than was perceived in the first place. Eric, a suspicious character with a muddled past and a murky record of personal life, gradually revealed some information that did indeed link Rebecca to an even more elite and shadowy circle of people. He told the detectives that besides his own contacts with Rebecca, he had observed something strange in her meetings with a few individuals, a circle composed of powerful businessmen and local politicians. He said that, before her death, Rebecca had been preoccupied with some high society do, a charity dinner hosted by some big-time local businessman named Victor Langford. Supposedly well-connected, he sponsored all sorts of things, but his background was murky. Rebecca, as she grew further enmeshed in this circle of society, was beginning to take an inordinate interest in a series of donations and investments he had made. The charity dinner was an event that impressed Rebecca because of its modus operandi, and because she would get to network with some important personalities in the social circle she was starting to get involved in. He said that Rebecca had been getting more and more restless, wanting to get to the bottom of Langford's donations, which appeared huge and more frequent than normal. Also, among the meetings with Rebecca, Eric had found an enigmatic note, a paper with a coded message referring to a next step and an exposed. This note was found in Rebecca's things. The presence of this note insinuated she had planned something huge, something she intended to reveal. In Eric's mind, the note related back to the charity dinner and an event Rebecca had been waiting for, crucial for her investigation. It wasn't long until the role of Victor Langford and what relation he had with the case started to set in, as more evidence came to the forefront. He seemed to be the linchpin in this web of events involving the financial scheme and the threats Rebecca had been receiving. With his squeaky clean public image and the array of very influential connections he held. His being at the charity dinner, along with other connections to characters in the case, showed a network of corruption and manipulation that unfolded so alarmingly. The next lead in the case would be to bring to light exactly what Rebecca had wanted to expose about Victor Langford, and how this related to her murder. Charity dinner, the mysterious note, and heightened social tension began to connect with each other ever more transparently. The mystery deepened. Truth inched closer to exposure. With the path starting to illuminate, detectives were prepared to delve into the complexities that welded all the characters involved together. The investigation became really incisive when detectives began to take a closer interest in Rebecca Myers and her relationship with the influential businessman Victor Langford. His presence at the charity dinner and connection to David and Angela Roberts' scheme raised further doubts on just how expansive the mystery really was. With the public persona as a philanthropist and at the helm of vast amounts of money, Victor Langford was in an empowered position to manipulate events and influence decisions. His activities in social causes and an impeccable reputation served as a very effective disguise for less noble activity. Rebecca was getting closer and closer to the crux of the matter in her hunt to expose the truth. As the detectives got deeper into the details of the charity dinner, a new piece of the puzzle showed up, a security footage of Rebecca talking to Langford in some secluded corner of the event. A very short conversation was charged with tension and whispers, indicative of a discussion about sensitive information. The exact nature of their discussion remained a mystery, but the gravity of it all had already been established. It was also detected by the detectives that Rebecca had been to a law firm in the area where she had gone several times before she died. She reportedly attended consultations with an attorney specializing in financial and criminal law, seeking advice on how to go about the evidence she had so far gathered. The attorney, a very highly respected man for a very long time, reported that Rebecca had gone to him for a consultation in great urgency, but it was not clear on what had been talked about. The relationship between Rebecca and Victor Langford began to raise further suspicions. Langford seemed to be developing a special interest in Rebecca's investigation, his behavior all the time getting defensive as the probe got deeper. He was trying to distance himself from any direct connection to the scheme, but with evidence suggesting otherwise. Detectives also investigated Langford's past, which unearthed previous allegations of questionable financial practices against him, though he was never convicted of any. His ability to manipulate systems and contacts in high places pointed to the possibility that he would have had a motive to eliminate anyone or anything that posed a threat to his reputation and operations. The next step in the case would be to establish what Rebecca had really discovered about Langford and what exactly related that to David's and Angela's financial scheme. Pressure was on, and it was pretty clear by now that this was a pretty complicated case. The linking of Langford and the law firm to the edgy interaction at the charity dinner held the promise of peeling back even more layers of mystery and laying bare a plot intricate in nature, binding all those involved with it in totally unexpected ways. Truth was finally within grasp, and the resolution of the story was about to unfold. Just as the case of Rebecca Myers was reaching its climax, so detectives were able to unravel a rather complex plot involving David Myers, Angela Roberts, and Victor Langford. It was about to be revealed what exactly happened that led to Rebecca's death, and unwrap all the complexity of the case. Rebecca had been investigating the money laundering scheme that Langford was running, cloaking his illicit activities in the garb of a large-hearted philanthropist who donated handsomely. Her sharp investigation acumen and determination to dig deep finally helped her unearth the key links in money flows to very questionable investments Langford had entered into with David and Angela. The law firm Rebecca had gone to was a part of a corruption network. The attorney, behind the exterior respectable face, was in league with Langford and the Roberts to conceal fraudulent transactions by manipulating documents that would protect the players. Rebecca had gone to the lawyer in search of definitive proof, but threats and strong-arm tactics were used to silence her. It was on that fateful night at the beach that Rebecca was to meet an informant who held critical evidence on Langford. However, fearing exposure of his activities and involvement to be revealed as well, David had decided to act before the revelation was made. With Angela on his side, David set up an ambush to make sure Rebecca couldn't deliver the evidence and reveal what really happened. Their plan, however, was not perfect. The duplicity and manipulation that David and Angela had engineered started to come undone as evidence came to light and the parties concerned were confronted. Langford's involvement with the scheme was unveiled, and the network of corruption and financial crimes he had established was dismantled. David and Angela were arrested and subsequently charged with murder and conspiracy. Although Langford was charged, he saved himself by confessing fully and thus cooperating with the police. The corrupt lawyer was unmasked, lost his license, and thus tasted a small amount of what he had been reaping all those years. Rebecca's case, though tragic, brought to light a deep-rooted network of corruption within the community. Her effort to uncover the truth, though it cost her her life, left a legacy of courage and justice. Her memory is remembered by the justice that prevailed ultimately. In the end, another mystery solved, balance restored, but Rebecca's story would live on to remind people that in the pursuit of truth, danger lurks, yet it is always worth fighting for.